Networking and helping you make connections is our bread and butter at Agri TechE. We try to make it as accessible, useful, and exciting at each of our events, because we know that networking is not necessarily everybody cups of tea. Some people find it daunting, others find it nerve-wracking, a bit unnatural, but others also find it exciting and to get to know other people and meet others. But we know there's that always that daunting element, a little bit of how to best navigate a room, particularly when you arrive and you don't really know anybody. It's slightly different when you've already gone through a few in a particular sector and you start to see more and more familiar faces. But luckily, we've done a lot of events and we've gathered a number of tips and tricks over the years that I'll be sharing with you, that hopefully you'll be able to easily implement the next time you're at an event. But first, I'd like to start with a question to actually gauge the room a little bit. So my question is, what do you find is your biggest challenge when it comes to networking at events? I'm really interested in your answers, and we'll be using some of that to feed into the discussion. So please have a look at the poll that Christina's just put up, and if you can, just submit a single answer so that it's easy to go through. So we'll just leave a few seconds on whilst we gather answers, and then we can have a quick discussion before we move on. Okay, have we got any additional answers before we close the poll? Christina, I think you can close it now, so we can take a look. So thank you very much, everybody, for your answers. It's really interesting to see just a variation in different types of challenges. Starting conversations, I think, is one that comes up fairly regularly. Imposter syndrome as well, dealing with different types of events, so whether it's a really large conference when there's lots of people around, remembering names as well. I know that's something I still struggle with from time to time, and initiating conversations. So okay, that's really useful. Thanks very much, everybody. We will cover these in the discussion, and we're covering some of those points in the presentation as well. So hopefully you'll get some insights into that. So networking actually starts ahead of an event. There's a number of things that you can do to prepare yourselves that will actually help you in making the most out of the day. And perhaps what might seem like an obvious question to start with is, what's your goal for attending a particular event that you've registered for? But I think it's important to be spending a few minutes at least on it. You might think, your obvious goal, it's to meet and catch up with people. But actually, if you do a bit more digging around what your goal is for attending, then you'll get a bit more granularity that will help you provide a bit more structure to the day. So for example, it could be, your goal might be different depending on the type of event you're going to, whether it's a large trade show or a technical conference, or a small meeting. And for example, I know we've got some researchers in the room. If you're new to agriculture and you're wanting to better understand certain aspects of farming, for example, your priority might be to talk to farmers or advisors at an event. So I think it's useful to ask yourself that question before going, so that you can have some structure to your day when you come to the actual day. And the other really important one is knowing, if you can, in advance, who will actually be there. And that's where the attendee list or the delegate list is absolute gold. So whenever you have access to one ahead of an event, do make the most of that resource to see who will be attending. That's certainly something we offer at all of our in-person events, because we know how crucial it is to know in advance who's coming, so that you can do a bit of research. And that way you can identify whether, it might be that you know most people in the room, in which case you can see who do you like to catch up with. Or it might be that you spot a few new people or organizations that you hadn't come across previously. So even just spending 5 minutes looking people up and their organizations will actually go a long way. And that will help you identify who to talk to or who you want to prioritize on the day, and come up with some content for conversation topics. And at the end of the day, people really appreciate that when you're showing an interest and you've found out a bit more about them before an event and before meeting them. And actually, the same principle applies when you think about it. When you attend larger trade shows where there's exhibitions involved, do have a look at which exhibitors are present. Spend some time looking through that exhibitor list, and depending on the event that you've signed up for, it might be that you even get a key contact easily accessible that you can reach out to, introduce yourself, and either on LinkedIn or whatever online platform that event is using, to say that you'll be coming up to their stand and say hi. So at least that manages expectations a little bit, and people know that they'll be you'll be coming over to their stand to have a chat. And we certainly try and do that whenever we're exhibiting at an event, and if there is the option to meet people and organize meetings in advance. The other point of, or the other aspect of preparing for an event is that if you do have any branding that you can use, make sure you've got that ready to go. So whether that's clothing or a company badge or business cards, if you make yourself recognizable, this will help people to identify you more easily and ultimately help you as well. So ahead of an event, there's a number of things that you can do. It all starts really with that prep and identifying what you want to get out of that event. Go through that delegate list to see who you want to talk to in particular, and help you prioritize those people and organizations, and have any branding ready beforehand. And I think something else that's really useful at this stage, and you might think it might be quite early on, but it's definitely quality over quantity. So even if you only identify a couple of people to talk to, it's definitely something to start with. I think start building those genuine connections doesn't necessarily start with, okay, I'll hand out as many business cards as possible. It's really about identifying who you'll have those relevant conversations with, and whether you see a potential for collaboration there, depending on what your goal is for attending an event. So you're at the event, you've done a bit of prep, you've looked at that delegate list, and you've now arrived, and you're probably thinking, well, how do I do this? How do I do this again? I mean, I still sometimes ask myself that question. And at this stage, I always find it really useful to just do a very quick reality check, just to help put myself in the right frame of mind. So do remember that everybody's there for similar reasons, and that's usually to meet other people and learn new things. And we've all felt nervous, and some of us still do, about appearing as though you're gate crashing a conversation or leaving someone on their own if you're leaving a conversation, even though you actually want to move on and talk to other people or catch up with somebody you've spotted. So I think it doesn't really matter how many years you've been doing this. We've all been in that situation, but do remember that everybody's there to meet other people and get to know others and learn new things. So actually, changing dynamics in conversations and navigating a room is actually of benefit to everybody in that meeting, and it can actually be done smoothly, politely, and with confidence. So I know that's something that came up in the poll earlier about starting or joining a conversation. Well, I think there's some lower hanging fruits that you can start with when you're at an event. Make the most of queues, whilst you're waiting for a drink, or you're going to the loo, or if you're on your way to the venue as well. I can guarantee you that you'll have someone in front of you, behind you, or next to you who you can easily connect with over terrible traffic that you've had on your way there. So it doesn't always immediately have to start about a conversation about work or a professional context. Another good place to start is actually the edges of a room. That's something we've definitely noticed at events. So you'll have, a big congregation of people, whether it's lunchtime around food, or the registration table, or the drinks as well. But once people have had what they need, then they tend to retrieve to the edges of the room, and that's where you can fairly easily identify someone that might be on their own, and then you'll be saving somebody from doing it themselves, approaching them and introducing themselves. So as you build your confidence, you can try larger groups. 2 to 3 people I find is a really good way to join in conversations. Once it starts to get to larger groups, groups of 4 or 5, it is a bit more difficult. But I think in all these scenarios, what's really key is to ask to join in and actually let the conversation continue, so that it doesn't feel like it's an abrupt interruption to those who are already in the conversation. So there's a few phrases that we've heard around at our events, and that I've heard as well, that you can try for joining groups of 2 or 3 people. So, do you mind if I jump in? May I join you? Don't let me stop you. I'll find the right time to jump in, or be curious from the start and ask, what were you talking about? And once the conversation is flowing, do listen, ask questions, and people will really appreciate your curiosity, because it shows that you're paying attention. And then you can add value by sharing something that has resonated with you, or if there's a report or someone you talk to that you think would be useful, do share that with us, with people. Or if something pops up later on, you can save it for when you're actually following up after an event. So that's about joining conversations. And also, leaving conversations is another time that people find a bit tricky at networking. Well, actually, if you feel like the conversation has come to a natural stop, or if you've spotted someone that you're really keen to talk to, from when you've had a look at that delegate list and you've prioritized that person in particular, you don't have to stay in that current conversation. It's really easy to let it drag on, but You don't have to. It's absolutely okay to leave a conversation. Everybody's there to meet other people. So as I said earlier, you're doing everybody a favor in that room to actually take control of the situation and move on if you feel like the conversation has come to a stop, or you want to talk to other people. And your exit strategy, as I call it, that might change slightly depending on whether you actually want to connect with them or carry on the conversation. If you're a bit tight for time, but you know that there's a follow-up you want to do, or you simply want to move on and you feel like you've not quite connected with that person, or you haven't found anything in common that would be worth following up with. So phrases that you might want to try, for example, and what I found really useful is to think of your exit line in two parts. So for example, it's been really nice chatting to you, getting to know you, but there's someone I see that I need to catch up with. Let's connect on LinkedIn, for example, or I don't want to keep you from meeting others. So there's several phrases that you can use, and depending on which event you go to, that you can just have a go. I think with those entry and exit lines, the more practice you get, the better you will get at it. So I mentioned about exchanging contact details. So if you want to follow up with someone, definitely make your intention clear, and then you can tailor your exit line with either let's connect on LinkedIn, for example, or shall we exchange contact details to follow up after. So I actually have another question for you all. I'm really curious to find out whether, how you all exchange contact details these days. We still see business cards being exchanged at our events, a bit less nowadays than 4 or 5 years ago, for example, but we've got a multiple choice question for you. So yeah, it'd be really good to know how you guys exchange contact details these days, and that would actually help us as well for our events to better tailor things. So we'll leave a few seconds. Okay, I think we've had most people answer the poll. So Christina, thanks for putting that up. I think we can close it now. But that's really interesting to see that, we've thought, is the business card actually dead these days? Are people just using that QR code on LinkedIn? We've seen people exchange details that way, but it looks like from, there's the small sample that we've got today, that business cards are still very much in use. So that's really interesting. We can come up to exchanging contact details in a bit more detail in the discussion, but thanks for that. That's really interesting. So when you're at an event as well, and if you find yourself a little bit stuck, or you don't know who to talk to, do make use of the event organizers who are there. If you find yourself lingering around at one of our events, do come up to chat to us, to catch up, and if there's anybody that you want to talk to in particular, we can let you know whether that person is actually in the room or not, whether they're turned up, and we'll know that delegate list inside out, so we can help you save a bit of time and do an introduction for you. So I think regardless of what event you talk to, do definitely make use of the event organizers, because we can help. That's what we're here for. And we are always scanning the room as well. So if we do find, it has happened before, when people get stuck in conversations and we can see that the body language is starting to change, we can definitely come and help you move on as well. So, do use us when you come to our in-person events. And finally, so we've covered, prep ahead of an event, what you can do for navigating a room at an event. And finally, I think the crucial bit as well, we're starting to build those connections and for them to potentially lead to something else further down the line, is to actually do that follow-up. That's really, really important. And it can be as simple as a message on LinkedIn, or an email address if you've managed to capture that on the day. But you can just reiterate what you enjoyed about a conversation, share any insights that you think might be useful to that person, a link to a report, for example. And if there is anybody that you wanted to speak to, but for some reason you didn't get around to, you can reach out to the event organizers. We're more than happy to do an introduction on your behalf, or reach out to people on LinkedIn as well. It's a great tool to use. So definitely make the most of it. So in summary, prepare. I think it's a crucial bit, particularly if you've got access to a delegate list. Just spending five minutes before an event to see who will be there, and asking yourself that question. What do I want to get out of that event? That will help you save some time on the day. And do have some joining and leaving lines up your sleeve as well. And the more events you go to, you can practice those and tailor them depending on the type of event you go to. But if you've got that front of your mind, then you'll find it easier to navigate the room more easily. And don't forget about scanning the edges of the room, because that's where we find that's where the lower hanging fruits are. You can identify talking to people a bit more easily that way, and then it is easier to work through the room. And follow up as well. That's of course that's a crucial one when it comes to building those connections. But I think the important bit as well, which we didn't really cover, but we can comment to that in the discussion, is to be yourself, be curious, and actually enjoy yourself. I think authenticity is really key when it comes to making connections, and no one's there to bite you or grill you at an event. So I can guarantee that what you know and who you are will actually always be of value to somebody else in that room. And people like talking about themselves as well. So ask questions, and people will appreciate and will remember that. And as I said earlier, it doesn't all have to be about work. You can connect over terrible traffic, or however how much drama you had on the school run, or an upcoming holiday, or the weather, because we love talking about the weather in agriculture. So you don't have to start in that professional context straight away. It's easier to break the ice with those topics, and that will help you quickly build that confidence. And at the end of the day, networking is supposed to be fun and rewarding. So do that reality check if you find yourself getting a bit nervous at the beginning of an event, and enjoy yourself. So that's it from me in terms of my presentation. I'm really excited to for the next half hour to introduce Bianca Forte and Danny Rush as well. And then we can. Hi, Danny.
Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic.
Bianca, I'm glad your technical issues with the sound got sorted. But yes, as I said at the beginning, we're now going to go into a discussion with our members, Danny and Bianca. So I wondered whether you could. Both of you could introduce yourselves, and I do have a question for you just to start things off. If you could perhaps share with our members what your best and worst experience has been at networking at an event. Danny, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Danny. I finished my PhD at Cranfield towards the end of last year. And then I moved to work for Ceres Research, which is Ceres Rural's new research branch of Ceres Group. And the aim of research is to bridge the gap between academic outputs and what's actually going on farm. And I started with them in October during the sort of crossover of finishing my PhD and starting work. And was it both positive and negative, Laura, or was
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, best and worst, positive and negative. That works as well.
Okay. My worst experience is probably an event that I attended and I didn't speak to anyone, which is the worst thing for a networking event. And it was due to more of a sort of, I guess, social burnout or low social battery to begin with, and I just didn't feel comfortable with it. I took some takeaways from the presentations, but I didn't actually network. And then on the flip side, I've had many good networking opportunities and events where I've had loads of really positive conversations. I've taken away loads of contact details, and I'd say that's quite a positive experience.
And Danny, that event went to where you didn't talk to nobody, that must have felt pretty horrible. Was that a big event? What
Yeah, it was I'll say which one. So it's the Oxford Farming Conference. So it's not necessarily a networking event per se, but
Yeah.
it is an event where you'd like to make connections. And it was the year before last, and I think it was quite a busy time with the PhD, quite a stressful time. And I wanted to go for the knowledge part and just didn't really feel it is quite early on in the year, and I suppose I just didn't feel ready for a lot of social interaction.
Yeah, and I think that's okay as well. You've got to be in the right mindset and frame of mind to be doing networking, because it is tiring, particularly for those in those larger situations, and it can be quite overwhelming as well, particularly at the beginning of the year when everybody's just coming back and still in holiday mode a little bit. But good to hear that you've had other really positive experiences as well that can compensate for that. Bianca, what about you?
Hi, Laura. So let me start with a brief introduction. So
Yes.
I'm a biologist by background, but I haven't been in a lab in a very long time. I've actually developed my career in this area of business development, open innovation, and partnership management. I have about 18 years of professional experience doing this, which includes a lot of networking. In terms of my worst experience, it's probably to do with an investors event that's hosted in the UK every year. And this event has been going on for about 10 years. And a few years into the event, the company introduced a event app to allow delegates to organize their meetings before they had the actual event. And I didn't pick that up on that year when they were launching the app. So I just went to the event as usual, got there, and I couldn't get hold of any investors. I couldn't get hold of any strategic players who I wanted to talk to because they all booked their meetings in advance. So yeah, that was a big learning for me, and it's something that I would mention to you if you're ever attending an event that has one of these apps and there are people who you really want to meet at the event. Make the time to plan your participation and book those meetings in advance, because otherwise they might not be available to bump into you during the breaks. In terms of the best experience, that was actually quite recent. I attended the Biostimulants World Congress last year, and I managed to secure a speaking slot as part of the innovation section. And luckily we won. I say luckily because, it could have gone other way and other people could have taken the prize as well, because it was quite competitive. But having that exposure at the start of the event made loads of people contact me through the event app to organize one-to-ones while I was still there. So this was a 3-day event. And, I had plans to attend loads of interesting talks during those 3 days. I ended up not going to one single talk because I had meetings back to back as a result of having that exposure at the start of the event. So, if you ever have an opportunity like that to get your brand highlighted at the start of the event, it could be quite useful for networking.
Oh, that's some really good tips there, Bianca. Thank you. And it's really interesting you mentioned those apps. I think we're seeing them cropping up more and more, particularly for the larger events. You know, we're talking 200, 300 plus. But it's interesting to hear that, yeah, unless you do make the time in advance, it could be, yeah, people are in back-to-back meetings and you can't actually make the most of those impromptu meetings or connecting with people. So that's really interesting and a good one to bear in mind, definitely. So I guess perhaps we could start by going back to the initial question I asked our delegates at the beginning, and you've mentioned some of these already, but what do you both find most challenging about networking nowadays? Do you find that it depends which event you go to? Annie?
Yeah, for me, it's that introduction, especially when you walk into a room and most people, you know, if you're not the first one there, people sort of form their groups, and it's really hard to just approach a group in conversation. So one, you end up breaking up the conversation even for a second, and two, you don't quite know, you know, how to approach it. I usually just go in and sort of say, like you mentioned, or you know, I'll just listening in, and then I'll jump in later, or it depends where I'm at. But some events I end up saying, I'm just that awkward person that's just joined, so please continue, and you know, I'll introduce myself later.
Yeah, that's really good. I think to let people know that, you know, make it as least abrupt as possible. So yeah, some good tips there. What about you, Bianca? What do you find challenging?
The same, especially when I've spotted someone who I really want to meet and they are in a group that has a very closed body language.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been a couple of events that I've been to where I literally followed this person like during the break to try and find an opportunity. But you know, depending on the event, you might find that there are certain types of stakeholders who are not widely represented, and then if that's the target audience for you, you're just going to have to go through that uncomfortable moment of, you know, trying to grab that person's attention.
Yes, definitely. I think in some instances you definitely have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because at the end of the day it only lasts a few seconds, but once you've jumped that bridge, then you know you've got your conversation, it will be flowing, and you'll have had that crucial touch point to carry on.
Yeah, think of it as like removing a band-aid, you know, just do it.
Exactly, and I think that's what I mentioned in the presentation. The more you'll do it, the more comfortable you'll get doing it. But yeah, it doesn't matter how many years you've done it. Sometimes it still feels as uncomfortable as the first time you've done it. So
yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, and there are occasions when, you know, I do still feel a little bit uncomfortable to start with, but you just have to go through it. So
yeah, you do. And I think this is also where you can use the event organizers as well. So if there is somebody that you're finding really, really difficult to track down, or if it's someone that's in demand, one of the speakers at the event, for example, then that's somewhere where we as event organizers, if it is an Agri TechE event, that's somewhere where we can definitely help. And, you know, we don't mind interrupting conversations, you know, politely, of course, but we'll know most people, so do definitely make use of us. The other question I wanted to ask you both is, what do you usually do when you don't know anybody in the room? Do you find that it's a bit more comfortable, or do you actually find it easier to go up to people that you don't know, or how often does it happen these days, or is it really a mixture?
For me, there's two places where I know a fair amount of people. One of them is the British Society of Soil Science Early Career Conference, and the second's the Women in Food and Farming Network, when we have in-person meetings. And those two are really nice to walk into a room and sort of know, you know, who you're going to see. Everything else, the majority of people I've not met before. They give me another 6 months and I might have a different story. And I find when you walk into a room and you don't know anyone, I actually find it a lot easier going by myself, because then I will speak to other people. But if I'm with somebody else I know, or, you know, a colleague from work, I find it more difficult to then sort of split off and go and speak to new people. You end up sort of coming back to those that you know. So it's almost easier, in my opinion, to go into a room where you don't know many people.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Bianca?
These days for me, in terms of UK-based events, when I go to them, I usually see a good number of people who I've met already. I don't know, maybe at least 20% of people who I know, and I think those are important opportunities to touch base with your contacts and actually build that relationship. So I do try to spend like five minutes or 10 minutes talking to the people who I know, depending on how important they are for the things that I'm developing in my job at the moment. I don't find it difficult to go and meet new people usually, except when I'm in that situation where they are part of a group with a very closed body language. Then I find it harder. Yeah. I actually enjoy going to events with lots of new faces because it means I'm going to learn new things. Not that I don't learn new things from existing contacts, but I already know who they work for and I have an idea of what the organizations are about. And it's useful to go to these events also to learn new things.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting point, Bianca, because the networking or the building connections and relationships in the longer term, it doesn't just happen in one event. It takes several of those, or exchange of emails, or seeing people in Teams meeting, or, you know, following up and having a chat either through the phone or those connections. So yeah, I'd agree with you. I think it's quite healthy, probably, from a professional perspective, to have a mixture of, you know, events like the ones you were mentioning, Danny, where you're seeing familiar faces, but also going to new ones where you will get that insight from new people or organizations that you've not come across beforehand. And yeah, doing that in the longer term, and yeah, getting to know people over the course of events. And what else did I want to ask? So have you ever been to events where there isn't a delegate list, apart from the larger events where you probably won't get one, but the smaller ones, or have you found that that was a really missing piece of information, or how do you usually deal with entering a room without having done a little bit of prep beforehand? How do you usually prioritize talking to people at those events, or do you just go with the flow and kind of see what happens?
I tend to go with the flow and see what happens, particularly for the bigger ones where, you know, the schedule might be so huge that, and there's multiple different things going on at the same time, that it can be quite overwhelming. So I tend to just pick a few options and then outside of that, just see where the day takes me. I think most places now have delegate lists. I know, Laura, I've badgered you for some before to follow up with, because
Yeah.
I will then always follow up with the people that I think are most relevant for what I'm doing.
I find it very unhelpful when event organizers don't provide a delegates list, even if it's just the name of the companies that are there. So what I've done, and actually I don't think that happens that often anymore, but it used to happen. And when I found myself in those positions, I would usually go to the organizers and say, "Hi, my name is Bianca. I work for Sugar Dogs. This is what we do. This is what I'm hoping to get out of today's event. Can you tell me a little bit about the other people that you have in the room?" as I'm just trying to put it back on them to try and help me navigate that, given that they haven't organized the information required to make it a productive event. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good to know. And well, I guess you mentioned body language earlier, Bianca, and I wanted to pick up on that and maybe have a bit more of a discussion around that. So, how do you usually go about reading body language? Do you wait for a group to feel like they're a bit more open to join a conversation? How do you usually use that to then help you navigate the room? Have you got any tips at all?
For me, I'll go first on this one, Danielle, if that's okay. For me, the groups that look closed usually are typically only making eye contact within the people in that group. So say if you have 3 or 4 people, they also have their backs. They get in a circle with their backs to the rest of the room. They tend to speak a little bit quieter as well. And those 3 things for me are an indication that they might be discussing some sort of ongoing business that they have together or opportunities that they want to develop together. When they don't have a more expensive body language, or if the rooms are not wandering around, the eyes are not wandering around the room to see who else is available to talk to. That's for me an indication that there might be a serious conversation going on. And that's where I tend to wait before I approach them. Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Danny? Is that something you're still figuring out, or is that something you rely on, like body language and being able to read people's body language in the room when you're networking?
Yeah, I think I'd say the same as Bianca. Some people do look very closed in, and usually they're having a meeting, a more official meeting between themselves in that environment. So I wouldn't approach them. But in my experience, most people, when they're not having those sorts of conversations, you approach and you'll be approaching them and they'll already sort of open up, or one person will give you eye contact or something like that. So then you sort of know that you can, most people in these sorts of situations are there to network. So it's in their best interest to allow you into the conversation as well.
No, that's a really good point. Something else that came up in the poll as well, which I'd be really interesting to hear both of your thoughts about, is remembering people's names. And do you have any tips at all for people? Is that something you still struggle with at some events? How do you do it? How do you remember people's names?
Well, the name of people who I see on a regular basis, or say, at least once a year at events, is easier to remember.
Yeah.
But to be honest, because I've been working for 18 years and going to events has been part of my job for a little while, I don't remember the name of most people who will come to me at events and say, "Oh, hi, nice to see you again." And I just, need to allow a moment or so to get a few tips as the person starts talking, to try and remember, where they work, or, and then the memory usually comes back. But yeah, immediately I don't remember the name of everyone who comes to me at an event and say, "Oh, hi, it's nice to see you again." And I think that's the case with most people. So I hope they don't take offense. I wouldn't take offense if it happened to me. So
Yes, definitely. I'd agree with that. What about you, Danny? Is there anything that you find helpful remembering people's names when you're in conversations? Or I think it's probably the same for everybody.
Yeah, I'm probably even worse. I'm really bad with names, but I will remember the face and what company usually. So I always, and I expect the same from the other person, like you said, Bianca. So I always go in with "Oh, it's Danny from Series Research. Nice to see you again," so that I can sort of jog their memory in case they don't remember who I am.
Yeah, and someone actually is making a really good point in the chat. Thanks, Shelley. Yeah, that's why it's always really good to connect on LinkedIn. So you've got that additional opportunity as well to put a face to a name. I think particularly ahead of events as well. But I know that's something I I struggle with as well. I'm similar to you, Danny. I tend to remember people's their role, what they do, the company they work for, and kind of the wider context. But the name is sometimes still tricky. But it happens to a lot of people, and I think it's okay. Most people won't take offense. But yeah, those little things like looking people up on LinkedIn definitely help with that.
I find LinkedIn very, very useful. And actually, when I meet someone who is potentially very important for my role at an event, and it's a new contact, when I connect with them on LinkedIn, I also send them a message saying, "Oh, it was nice to meet you, today in London at such and such event," so that if I meet them again in the future, I have a record on LinkedIn of how I met that person. So yeah, I use it a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great tool for either around an event, whether it's pre-event, post-event, to follow up with them and quickly acknowledge that you've had a conversation. It's just those helpful little seeds that you sow that just make it easier for that next time you might be reconnecting with them. Danny, have you found that useful as well in your use? Do you use LinkedIn a lot for networking, whether that's looking people up or following up with them?
Yeah, I'm always on there, and I use it partly for what I'm doing, but also that's part of my role with Series is that I run their Series Research LinkedIn account. So we use that as well to, it's quite useful at the end of an event to share your key takeaways for those that weren't there, but also you can then sort of tag the companies that you were in contact with, and it like you said, it's another seed that helps that collaboration and memory of who each other are.
Yeah. And just going back to remembering people names, Rob's making a really good observation there about the name badges at events. I don't know whether there's any particular event that you can think of where you've had a particularly good name badge, or what do you find is really useful to have in there? Because sometimes you'll just have the person's name, but you won't necessarily have the company. We tend to add both to our name badges on at events, the name of the company and the name of the person. But can you remember anything in particular, or it's tricky when there's no badges sometimes?
I would just mention that small badges are not very inclusive for people as they start aging. I'm 45 now. I prefer the large badges with both the name of people and company names as well. And it's because it's a bit tricky to go around looking at people's, chests to try and figure out who they are if you are trying to spot someone at an event. So yeah, the badges are very important, I find.
Yeah, we know internally it's a conversation we have a lot, trying to make sure that we've got the best possible badge for people, because sometimes if it's a lanyard, you quite naturally find yourself pulling it up so that people just don't read at the bottom of you, or you've got it pinned on your chest. But as women, we don't always have a jacket or something to easily pin onto. Yeah, I don't think there is a perfect badge out there, but yeah, we definitely have those two key pieces of information.
I think what we need, Laura, is a tiara. Just do a tiara
don't we?
with a big badge. Yeah.
Then you can look
front
into people's faces and the names will be on there.
Yeah, front and back. You need the name on the back as well, the tiara. So.
And actually, in those larger events, what I find really useful, sometimes your name badge will flicker. So as an event attendee, definitely do check in with your badge, because the number of times we've seen people at events and the badge isn't the right way round. So it's useful when it's double-sided. It's perfect. Then you don't have to worry about that. But yeah, I'd say definitely check in with your badge and make sure that your name is on the right side. So do please keep your questions coming. Any observations, any experience that you want to share with our speakers as well. We've got a few minutes still. Another point that I wanted to cover is perhaps as one of the goals of attending an event, and maybe Bianca, that's more of a question for you. If you identify somebody that's of importance, and you might want to have more of a commercial conversation, how early do you start that? Do you save that for your follow-up with people? If there's somebody attending that wants to promote or sell their product or service, how do you weave that into the conversation when you're talking to people?
So I try to, if it's a multiple day event, I try to meet the most important contacts on day one, because if the conversation goes well, I can follow up with additional details on the same day, and then I can try and have a follow-up conversation while we're still there at the event. So I was able to do that quite successfully at a trade show that I attended in February, and also a biostimulants event that I attended last year in November. It worked really well. Also because then if there are additional experts at the same meeting who you need to speak to, they can bring colleagues into the conversation so that you can build momentum a little bit quicker than otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think of events as I have to go to 3 different types of events to meet with the 3 different types of stakeholders that I need to connect with in my job. So there are events that I attend to meet potential end users, so farmers. There are events that I attend to meet potential commercial partners, so the distributors. And then there are events that I attend to meet investors. And for each of those events, I do quite a bit of research at the planning phase to identify which types of events are available in the UK or abroad to meet that stakeholder group. And then I also reach out to the key contacts that I'm trying to connect with to check if they're going to the events and plan. So a lot of planning could go into this if you wanted to be really productive while you are at these events, rather than just showing up and hoping for the best.
I think that's a really useful tip to perhaps, even before starting attending events, think of who your stakeholders are, what events they go to, and then do it that way. Then it's probably easier to prioritize and identify those people that you want to talk to. No, that's really useful. Thanks, Bianca. Danny, what about you within your role working with different stakeholders and perhaps bringing collaborators on board?
Yeah, it's always really useful to see what kind of companies are attending before. And I think I said earlier, if there's quite a busy schedule, I'll just make a couple of notes of the really key people I want to speak to, and then see where the day takes me. Whereas Bianca, you're focusing on biostimulants, we are more, knowledge exchange across a range of areas. So we are open to conversations with different types of stakeholders. And different, startups and different types of businesses. So really for us, particularly at the moment with serious research being fairly new, only starting in October, we're really trying to speak to and reach as many different types of people that we can. So yes, having a look, it's always worth having a look, seeing what's on the agenda before anyway, as you would when you sign up for these things. But to just have sort of a key couple of things that you really want to achieve throughout the day is useful.
No, that's good, and it's interesting to hear from both of your perspectives, where your companies are on slightly different steps on that journey of growth. So yeah, I think hopefully Telecus will have found it really really useful. I am conscious of time, so I think I'd like to finish off with just one final question to you both, and that would be, what is your top networking tip for people who have joined us today?
I'd say don't be afraid to go on your own. You're more likely to speak to lots of people if you're not, going back to those people that you're more familiar and comfortable with.
Yeah, and for me, it would be that, although you might find it difficult to approach people to start with, just remember that everyone is there to meet people. So, you're not necessarily bothering them. They might want to meet you. And until you've introduced yourself to them and they've introduced themselves to you, you can't know if it's a relevant connection. So it's just part of the process.
Oh, great. Well, thank you very much to you both for your time, for sharing your experiences and your tips as well. So thank you very much for that. Thank you to people who have fed in their questions and conversations and took part in the couple of questions that we've had for you. We'll definitely bear that in mind for future events as well. So today kicks off Connections Week, so do have a look at our upcoming events this week, but also across the rest of the year. We've got a really busy events calendar, and the more you're able to come, the more you can put into practice what you've learned today about networking and making connections and having those joining and exit lines up your sleeve as well. So thank you very much to you all. Have a lovely afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you across the rest of the week.
Thank you.
You.
Bye.